Have you ever opened your mouth and no sound came out? Your mind full of words, your heart ready to speak, but your voice frozen. I know that feeling because it happened to me. That silence cost me my dream. It was the day I realized losing your language is like losing yourself. That voice I lost wasn't just English. It was my confidence, my courage, my connection to the world. And it took me 4 months, one mirror, and countless quiet nights to bring it back. Because learning English isn't really about learning a language. It's about learning how to begin again. What you'll hear today isn't a method, it's a mirror. Part 1. The Lost Key. 4 months ago, I sat in front of my computer, my dream glowing on the screen. 3 faces appeared, 3 native speakers, 3 chances to prove myself. They smiled, and within seconds, I was lost. Their voices blurred together like rain on a window. I tried to focus, but all I could hear was my heartbeat. When one of them asked, "Can you tell us about yourself?" My thoughts screamed in perfect English, but my mouth forgot how to move. I said something broken. I am software. I do coding. Good projects." Then silence. A long, heavy silence that told me everything. They smiled politely. "Thank you for your time." And the call ended. That moment. I didn't just lose a job. I lost my confidence, my sense of worth, and the image I had built of myself. I remember looking at my reflection and thinking, this isn't about English anymore. This is about fear. For years I told myself, I don't need English. I'm good enough. But that night, I saw the truth. Without English, I was invisible. English wasn't just a skill. It was a bridge. And I had burned it with excuses. So that night, I made a promise. No more waiting for perfect conditions. No more blaming school, time, or money. If I was going to change, it had to start inside me. 4 months. That's all I gave myself. No classes, no travel, no shortcuts, just one decision. To rebuild my voice from silence. People say motivation starts you. Discipline keeps you going. But for me, it wasn't motivation. It wasn't discipline. It was shame. And shame, when you listen to it, becomes instruction. That night, I wrote 6 words on a blank page. Pain, when listened to, becomes instruction. And under it, I wrote one more line. Tomorrow, I begin. I didn't know much then. But I knew this. Fluency doesn't begin with grammar. It begins with honesty. The courage to say, I don't know yet, but I will learn. That's where every real journey begins. And that's where mine did. In the quiet, with a mirror, a notebook, and the promise of a new voice. That night I didn't sleep much. Every sound in the room felt louder. The ticking clock, the hum of my laptop, the quiet weight of my own thoughts. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, a strange peace arrived. It wasn't comfort. It was clarity. I realized I didn't need a teacher yet. I needed a mirror, a place to face the person who kept saying maybe later. So when the first light entered my room, I knew exactly what to do. Part 2, the mirror. Learning to speak to myself. The next morning, I stood in front of a mirror. My hair was messy, my eyes still heavy from the night before, but something inside me was awake. I looked at my reflection and whispered, "Good morning." It sounded strange, slow, uncertain, like a stranger using my mouth, but I smiled. Because for the first time, I wasn't running from English, I was facing it. That became my ritual. Every morning before touching my phone, I faced the mirror and spoke. Not perfectly, not confidently, just honestly. Sometimes I said my name. Sometimes I said what I planned to do that day. Sometimes I just breathed and listened to the rhythm of my own voice. It felt awkward. It felt small, but it was real. I called it the mirror routine. In those early days, I didn't study new words. I studied myself. I wrote down 50 simple sentences, things I'd actually say in daily life. Hi, how are you? Can you repeat that? I don't understand. I'm learning English. I need a coffee, please. I read them every morning, not once, not twice, 10 times. At first, my tongue felt heavy, my mouth stiff. But after 5 days, something began to shift. The sentences didn't just live in my notebook anymore. They started living in me. Whenever I was alone, I talked to myself in English, in the shower. The water is warm. I feel relaxed. In the kitchen, I'm making eggs. I like eggs. They're easy to cook. While walking, the sky is clear today. At first it felt ridiculous, but I realized this was my private classroom. No one could hear me. No one could judge me. And every sentence was one step closer to freedom. People think fluency starts with knowledge. It doesn't. It starts with courage. The courage to sound wrong. To look silly. To keep speaking even when no one is listening. Because the truth is, before you speak English with others, you must learn to speak it with yourself. One night, my mother knocked on the door. "Are you talking to someone?" she asked. I laughed. "Yes, Mom," I said. "But this time, it's in English." She smiled and walked away, probably thinking I was crazy, but I knew what I was doing. I wasn't just learning English. I was learning confidence. After 15 days, I noticed something strange. When I looked in the mirror now, I didn't see the same person. My eyes had more light. My voice had rhythm. And for the first time, I didn't translate in my head. I simply spoke, and it felt natural. That's when I understood the first real truth of learning. Fluency doesn't begin with words. It begins with honesty. The mirror had shown me more than just my reflection. It had shown me my resistance and the courage to face it. I wrote one sentence in my journal that night. Confidence doesn't come after fluency. It comes before it. And with that truth, I was ready for the next step. By the end of those 2 weeks, speaking to myself no longer felt strange. English had started to sound like something living. Not a lesson, but a rhythm. Some mornings I'd catch myself talking without even noticing. Not perfectly, but freely. And that freedom made me curious. If I could speak to myself, could I learn to sound like them? The people who once scared me silent? That question stayed with me, and it became the doorway to the next phase of my journey. Part 3, the voice. Training rhythm, not grammar. Part 3, the voice. Training rhythm, not grammar. By the 3rd week, something inside me had shifted. I no longer studied English. I started feeling it. When I spoke, the words didn't sound like rules anymore. They sounded like rhythm. And I realized fluency isn't about grammar. It's about timing. That's when I began something I now call the question-answer flow. Every day, I asked myself one simple question in English and answered it fast. No translating, no overthinking, just responding. At first, it was awkward. "What did you do today?" I answered, "I worked." Then I pushed myself. "I worked on my project. I worked on my project for 3 hours. I worked on my project for 3 hours, then I took a break." Each time I added one more detail, one more beat. It was like music, my tongue learning the rhythm before my brain caught up. The rule was simple. Never pause too long. Even if I didn't know the perfect word, I kept talking. Because silence kills fluency faster than mistakes. And the more I spoke, the more I noticed something subtle. My fear was shrinking, sentence by sentence. I used to think fluency was about knowing everything. But it's not. It's about staying in motion when you don't know enough. Mistakes are like footsteps. Without them, you never move forward. After a few days, something changed. I could hold small conversations with myself that actually flowed. While walking, I'd ask, "What did you eat?" and answer, "Eggs and toast." Then I'd add, "Eggs, toast, and a banana," because I was really hungry. And just like that, my brain learned to stay in motion. That's when I understood a quiet truth. We don't fear English itself. We fear being seen trying. Once I stopped judging myself, English stopped judging me back. One night I tried something new. I paused a movie scene and copied the actor's line exactly. "I don't know what you're talking about." I repeated it 10 times, then 20. Same tone, same speed, same feeling. That's how I discovered what I now call the echo technique. It wasn't about copying sound. It was about copying confidence. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and repeat those sentences like a rhythm in the dark. At first it felt mechanical, but slowly, I could feel my body remembering. My shoulders relaxed, my jaw loosened, my breathing matched the sentence. It was strange. My body was learning faster than my mind. That's when I wrote a note to myself. You don't learn a language, you become it. Once I was so deep in my echo practice that my neighbor knocked on the wall. "Are you arguing with someone?" I laughed. "No, just my pronunciation." He didn't get it. But that laugh broke something heavy inside me. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to sound wrong. And I understood. Mistakes don't make you foreign. Fear does. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror again and listened to my own voice. It sounded different, clearer, warmer. Not perfect, but alive. It was like hearing myself for the very first time. And I realized, this is how children learn. Not by memorizing, but by echoing the world around them. From that day, I practiced every single evening. Not memorizing, echoing. Sometimes movies, sometimes podcasts, sometimes songs. And slowly, I felt my voice catching up to my thoughts. One afternoon, while shadowing a podcast, I heard the host say, "It was a beautiful day," so I decided to go for a walk. I repeated it softly, once, twice, 10 times, and somewhere between the words, my voice aligned. Not forced, not borrowed, mine. I paused just to listen. For the first time, I liked the sound of my own voice. It didn't sound foreign anymore. It sounded human. And in that moment, I understood something deeper. Learning a language isn't about sounding like them. It's about sounding like you, but clearer. That night I wrote, "Your mouth learns before your mind." And it's true. The more you move your mouth, the more your brain trusts it. Because pronunciation isn't about accent. It's about emotion. When you speak with emotion, your mouth remembers. And every sentence you feel becomes a part of you. After a month, it finally happened. I was walking home, listening to English, and suddenly realized I understood almost everything. No translation, no panic, just flow. For the first time, English didn't sound like noise. It sounded like music, and I was finally part of it. I stopped walking, closed my eyes, and smiled. It wasn't just that I could understand. It was that I could feel. The rhythm, the pauses, the tone, they all carried meaning. And that's when it hit me. Grammar could wait. Rhythm couldn't. Because fluency isn't about being correct. It's about being connected. From that day, I spoke with rhythm, not rules. With feeling, not fear. And I realized fluency doesn't live in your grammar book. It lives in your breath. With that rhythm in my voice, I felt ready for the next step. To stop talking to myself and start talking to the world. After that month, everything felt quieter inside me, not silent, just calm. I no longer chased words. They started coming on their own, like friends who finally trusted me again. And yet, something in me wanted more. I could speak. I could listen. But I still thought in my native language. It was time to stop translating life and start living it in English, not as a student, but as someone seeing the world through new eyes. Part 4, The Window. Thinking in English, seeing differently. It began quietly. One morning while walking to work, I caught myself thinking in English, not forcing it, not trying. Just thinking. It was a small moment, but it felt like freedom. I looked at the sky and said, "The clouds are beautiful today." Then I smiled because I hadn't translated it first. It came naturally, like breathing. That was the day I realized something profound. Language isn't just what you say, it's what you see. For so long, I used English as a tool to speak, to work, to sound smart. But that morning, it became a window. Through it, I saw life differently, simpler, softer, more alive. When you start thinking in a new language, you don't just change your words, you change your thoughts. And when your thoughts change, you change the way you feel the world. I began to notice small things I'd ignored before. The rhythm of footsteps on the street, the way strangers greeted each other, the sound of my own breathing while reading aloud. Each detail became a lesson in presence, each sentence a quiet mirror reflecting how much I'd grown. In the evenings, I kept a small notebook, but I no longer called it my English journal. It was just my life in words. Every night I wrote about my day. Not as a student practicing English, but as a person feeling in two languages. At first, my sentences were still simple, but their meaning grew deeper. Instead of "I was tired," I wrote, "I felt the day pull me down, but my mind stayed calm." Instead of "I worked hard," I wrote, "I gave my best today, and I'm proud of my effort." The words changed me, because the language you use to describe your life becomes the life you live. Sometimes I'd catch myself switching languages mid-thought, and it didn't bother me anymore, because I realized I wasn't losing my first language, I was expanding my mind. Every new phrase opened another window in my thinking, and the more windows I opened, the brighter my inner world became. One evening, I recorded myself speaking, not to test pronunciation, but to hear my thoughts aloud. And when I listened back, I felt something shift again. The voice was calm. The words flowed. But what touched me most wasn't how it sounded. It was how it felt. I could hear peace in my tone, confidence in my pauses, and gratitude in every breath. That night, I wrote another note. When your thoughts become fluent, your heart follows. And maybe that's the real purpose of learning. Not to speak perfectly, but to understand yourself more clearly. Thinking in English didn't just make me fluent, it made me present. I started living slower, noticing more, feeling more. English stopped being my goal. It became my way of seeing. And as that realization grew, I understood something deeper. Fluency is not about mastering a language. It's about letting a language reshape your silence. The next morning, I stood by my window. The city was waking up, people hurrying to work, birds crossing the sky. And in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, "This language has changed the way I see." After weeks of quiet reflection, I noticed something missing. I had learned to listen, to think, to feel, but deep inside, there was a small ache, the ache of silence. It wasn't fear anymore, it was longing, because every language, sooner or later, wants to be heard. I looked out my window one evening, watching people talk, laugh, live, and I thought, I've learned to speak to myself. Now it's time to speak to others, to step outside my room, to let my voice meet the world. Part 5. The Bridge. Connecting with others, speaking without fear. At first, I didn't know where to begin. I had spent months speaking only to myself. My room had become my comfort zone, a safe island made of words. But even islands need bridges. So I built mine, one small step at a time. The first bridge was with my friends. I started texting them in English. Short messages, simple words, but honest. They laughed at my grammar sometimes, but I didn't mind. Because for the first time, I wasn't chasing perfection, I was chasing connection. Then, I joined an online group where people practiced English together. At first, I was silent, just listening, just reading the chat, trying to catch the rhythm. But one day, someone asked a question. "What's your favorite food?" My heart raced, my palms sweated. It was such a simple question, but to me it felt like a test. Still, I took a breath and answered, "I love pizza." Then I added, "Because every slice reminds me of home." The group laughed softly, not at me, with me. That was the first time English felt warm. After that, I started joining more conversations. Sometimes my sentences broke, sometimes my accent slipped, but I kept going because I realized confidence doesn't come from being fluent. It comes from surviving awkward moments and still staying in the room. The more I spoke, the more I understood people, not just their words, but their emotions, how they used silence, how they smiled between sentences, how kindness sounded the same in every language. One night, I joined a video call with people from 6 different countries. At first, I felt that old fear again, the fear of being less, of being slower. But then I remembered my mirror. I remembered my rhythm. And I spoke. Not perfectly, but clearly, from the heart. I told them about my journey. How I had once failed an interview because I couldn't speak. How I had started talking to myself. How English had changed the way I saw everything. When I finished, there was silence. But this time it wasn't awkward. Someone smiled and said, "Jake, your story is inspiring." And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. I wasn't just using English anymore. I was sharing myself through it. From that night, I made a promise. Whenever I spoke in English, I would speak with honesty. Not to impress, but to connect. Because truth travels faster than perfect grammar. Little by little, my fear dissolved. Not because I stopped making mistakes, but because I stopped hiding from them. Every time I said something wrong, someone helped me fix it. Every time I hesitated, someone waited. And I realized most people aren't judging you. They're just waiting for your real voice to show up. The more I spoke with others, the more my English grew roots. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a relationship. I listened. I replied. I asked questions. I cared. And the language responded. One day after a group call ended, a woman from Spain messaged me. "You sound confident now. What changed?" I thought for a long moment and wrote back, "I stopped trying to sound like a native. I started sounding like myself." And that's the truth. The bridge I was building was never made of words. It was made of courage. Now, every time I speak English, I think of that bridge, stretching between my world and someone else's. Each conversation is a crossing. Each mistake, a step. And every time I reach the other side, I'm not just more fluent. I'm more human. Weeks passed. My confidence grew. My voice felt lighter. But soon, I met a different kind of challenge. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fatigue. The excitement faded. The progress slowed. And for the first time in months, I felt stuck again. I knew I had come far, but the climb ahead still looked endless. There were mornings when I didn't want to practice, evenings when my mind felt empty. It wasn't about skill now. It was about stamina. And that's when I realized this journey wasn't just about learning English. It was about learning discipline. Part 6. The Climb. Facing setbacks and staying consistent. There's a moment in every journey when progress slows down. You're still moving, but it feels like walking through mud. That's where I was. The excitement was gone. The rhythm that once lifted me now felt heavy. Every morning, I stared at my notebook and asked myself, do I really have to do this again? I had come so far, but suddenly I didn't feel proud anymore. I felt tired, drained, ordinary, and that was dangerous. Because the greatest enemy of growth isn't failure, it's fatigue. There were days I didn't practice at all, days I said, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow didn't come easily anymore. I knew those were the moments that truly tested who I was. Not the easy mornings, but the heavy ones. So I decided to change my approach. Instead of chasing perfection, I focused on showing up. I told myself, no matter how small, I will do something in English today. Some days I practiced for an hour. Other days, just 10 minutes. But I never broke the chain. And slowly, I began to understand a different kind of progress. The kind that doesn't look impressive, but builds strength quietly. The kind that turns effort into habit, and habit into identity. There was one night I almost quit. I sat at my desk feeling defeated. The words blurred on the page. Nothing made sense. I whispered, maybe I've reached my limit. But then I remembered why I started. That day of failure, that interview, that silence that hurt more than rejection. I closed my eyes and saw my younger self again. The boy who couldn't speak, the one who promised to never give up. And I realized I couldn't quit on him. From that moment, I made a rule. If I can't run, I'll walk. If I can't walk, I'll crawl. But I'll keep moving, even slowly, even tired, even imperfect, I'll move. The strange thing about discipline is, it doesn't get easier. You just get stronger. And one day, you look back and realize the climb that once broke you is now part of your strength. A few weeks later, I opened my journal and read my old entries. They were full of mistakes, misspelled words, broken sentences, but they made me smile, because behind every wrong word was a person who refused to stop trying. That night, I wrote a new line. Consistency doesn't show you results first. It shows you who you are. After that, my practice felt different. Not lighter, but deeper. I no longer practice to become fluent. I practice to keep a promise to myself. And that made all the difference. Some days were still hard. Some mornings still heavy. But now I carried a quiet kind of faith, the faith that even slow steps still move forward. Because fluency, like every climb, isn't about reaching the top. It's about not giving up when the air gets thin. I didn't know it then, but this slow, quiet persistence was shaping something bigger. A version of me I hadn't met yet. And soon, I would. Then one morning I woke up before the alarm. The city was still quiet. The air, almost golden. I made my coffee, opened my notebook, and began to read aloud, just like I had done 100 times before. But this time, something felt different. The words didn't feel heavy. They flowed, natural, effortless. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing fluency. I was living it. I didn't realize it then, but that morning was my summit. The moment where effort turned into ease, and the climb became a view. Then one morning, I woke up before the alarm. The city was still quiet, the air, almost golden. I made my coffee, opened my notebook, and began to read aloud, just like I had done 100 times before. But this time, something felt different. The words didn't feel heavy. They flowed, natural, effortless. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing fluency. I was living it. I didn't realize it then, but that morning was my summit. The moment where effort turned into ease, and the climb became a view. Part 7, The Summit. Transformation and Return. I didn't plan a celebration, no fireworks, no big announcement, just a quiet morning and a heart that finally felt light. I opened my old notes, pages filled with broken grammar, misspelled words, tiny victories, and I smiled. Because those mistakes weren't signs of failure, they were footprints. Each one proof that I kept moving. I remembered the first time I couldn't answer a single question, the silence that burned, the shame that followed. And now, I was here. Not fluent like a native, but fluent enough to share my truth. Fluency, I realized, was never about sounding perfect. It was about sounding alive. To speak and know your voice belongs in this world. To share, not to impress, but to connect. To breathe words that once felt impossible and call them yours. I thought of my parents again. Their quiet faith in me, the sacrifices they made. I remembered the call, the day I finally told them, I got the job. My mother cried. My father said little, but I could hear pride in his silence. That moment, it wasn't just about English. It was about redemption, about keeping a promise to the person I used to be. Months later, when I spoke with new colleagues from around the world, I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel foreign. I felt equal. Because language is not about borders. It's about belonging. One evening, I sat by my window again. The same view, the same city, but everything looked new. Not because it had changed, but because I had. Learning English had given me more than a skill. It gave me a way to meet myself again, to rebuild confidence, to rediscover patience, to fall in love with learning itself. And I realized every language is really a mirror. The more you speak it, the more clearly you see who you are. If you're still on your climb, feeling stuck, feeling slow, feeling behind, remember this: progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like nothing's changing. But underneath that silence, you're growing roots. you're becoming ready. Fluency doesn't come all at once. It comes quietly. In the way you speak to yourself with more kindness. In the way your fear fades without you noticing. In the moment your voice stops shaking. Not because you're perfect, but because you're honest. And when that day comes, you'll know it. Not because others tell you, but because your heart will finally say, I belong here. The mountain doesn't give you fluency. It gives you clarity. And the view from the top isn't just about how far you've come. It's about how much you've changed on the way. So when you speak next time, speak like someone who's already free, because the climb is over, but the journey has just begun. Every journey changes you, but some reveal who you've been all along. Learning English was never just about words. It was about patience, about courage, about coming home to the voice I had lost. If you're still walking this path, don't rush. The world will wait. Your growth will find you. Just keep speaking, keep showing up, and one day, your words will meet your truth. Because fluency is not the end of a journey. It's the sound of becoming whole.